Hello everyone and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of the Calyx report edition. This audio podcast as part of a Bostix SandZtorm. This audio podcast as part of a Squadron Communique, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Bostix production. In this audio podcast, a little bit in around the sort of overall conclusions to this peer-reviewed and published works from 2014. So this review aimed to provide some insight into sort of the suitable laboratory model, the suitable laboratory model for nephrotoxic nephritis or glomerulonephritis, and relate its experimental validity in humans. Animals with experimental NTN or GN are homogeneous, whereas patients or recipients and human glomerulonephritis are heterogeneous. Experimental disease is initiated at a time determined by investigators and runs a predictable sort of course, thereby permitting intervention at defined sort of stages, including before induction, during disease establishment, or late in within the disease or around the disease. So patients and recipients sort of typically have established disease before treatment can be given. Renal damage tends to be progressive in the longer term, and despite elimination of of the original sort of basis of injury. So differences between experimental and human glomerulonephritis complicate translational or experimental therapies into practice. Stem cell-based therapies should be explored, and these could include, for example, genetic modification to produce protective molecules within the kidney, or to promote regeneration of damaged intrinsic renal cells. There's also a need for more up-to-date research to this topic, and further work is required to translate animal model sort of research in order to achieve a better understanding of glomerulonephritis disease in humans. The complexity of glomerulonephritis or GN research sort of makes findings a challenge to replicate consistently, or sort of to copy sort of consistently. And so finally, there must be sort of a continuing evidence-based assessment of immune and non-immune therapies in order to provide a sort of a rational care for our recipients and patients. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This has been an audio podcast as part of the Calyx report edition, an audio podcast as part of a Bostix SandZtorm, and this audio podcast as part of a Squadron Communique, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Bostix production. And in on the audio podcast as part of the sort of series. There will be a list of references where listeners and viewers can check out some of the literature to relating works, and the use of terminology such as chemokines, glomerulonephritis, macrophage colony stimulating factor, and nephrotoxic nephritis can be used in databases to identify similar literature, similar literature and similar works. Thank you.